In episode 9 of Youth Empowerment Radio, recorded at our recent summit, we feature voices from Lake County Wraparound, sharing powerful stories of youth fleeing dangerous conditions and navigating life without parental support. This episode highlights the importance of supporting existing programs and expanding resources to help vulnerable youth thrive.
The material and information presented here is provided by Lived Experience Youth and is for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of those of the guest only and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Grandma, I need my birth certificate and this and that. And because I'm going to go get like my identification card. And he's like from the rural mountains in Nicaragua. And he said he lied to his grandma to get his like birth certificate and this and that. And said like, I'll be right back, Grandma. And then just left.
Wow.
And left with a group. And this group of folks said, yeah, like, because they support each other, right? To like flee, right? And people will literally, the way he described it to me, said, yeah, somebody said, like, I'll help you pay to get there. And so he was like, yep, the next thing that I knew is, like, we got to the border. There's a whole process, right, of, like, detainment is the way that he described it to me, where they might be detained for a period of time. But then they, based on, like, the asylum, whatever, they get released with court orders, right? A hearing. Yeah. So they can then like enter the country, follow their hearing process, and they just have to like check in, right? But that's how he came to the country.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've heard of these two girls came and they were very young. I think one was 16 and the other one was like 14, sisters. They came over, and this was many years ago when they came, and they went through a really horrible time. It took like 6 months to come from Salvador, I think it was. They came it took them like 6 months to arrive in the United States, and they had to crawl through muddy canals, and they had to sleep in just wherever they were able to, and it was very frightening. They didn't have anything to eat. People shared water with them. And this was quite a few years ago, and it was very frightening. But they did help one another. Whoever the group was that they came with, they did help them to get here. And it wasn't like it is now where they waited and then they give them a court date and whatever. They just came in and found somewhere to live until they were able to get themselves their own apartment. And then their older sister came and she started working.
And then I think other populations that I also like feel like people miss that of homeless or youth that experience homelessness are youth whose parents are incarcerated, or they have one parent that became incarcerated and then another parent who passes. And so now they have to go fend for themselves, right? Or they might potentially like have started with a relative, and that was like the initial relative that took them in. But a very common thing that I see is that those relationships start to fail at adolescence. And so, yes, like a relative might have taken a young child when a parent became incarcerated, when the parent passes, and all the great intention was there to parent that child, to care for that child. But we know that adolescence is adolescence. And I always say young kids are young kids here and in Rome. And they're not different. Yeah. Right. And so when kids start to have challenges, like sometimes that relationship failed, and not everyone is able to care for a young person, right? With I would say again with like the same normal challenges that occur to every parent, right? That is parenting a teenager, I would say. And so that is a time in their life where they might get asked to leave. And when they're old enough to kind of be on their own, right? Somebody might tell him like, okay, I helped take care of you up to this time. Now you're good. Now you can go work, right? So they often, I say, like, we see a lot of 17 and a half year old where it's kind of that cutoff, right? Where they're not quite 18, but somebody has said like, you're good. You should go figure it out on your own. And those are like typical, we will get the knock on our door, which is a really awesome thing that I would say like we have been able to develop in our program, is that the youth do trust our program to come on their own, or we have had youth that have told their friends, like, go call this person, right? And they'll help you. And I would say like often like our first question is, do you have a place to sleep tonight? And that becomes our first thing to work on. If the answer is yes, I'm staying with someone, our place of starting is to help them be successful and being safe in that place and staying in that place as long as they can. And we will go off of what they tell us, right? If you tell me that it's a week, we have a week to work with. If you tell me that it's a month, we have a month.
Right.
But I want to know that. I want to get a sense of, are you safe? Are you good? What do you need? And how long can you stay? And start there, right? And again, that I think that that's what's great about our program, that we have developed that kind of, trust with people referring youth to us or youth coming on their own, and just working right with our staff and starting there with whatever they're telling us, right? It's like, how did you get in this situation? And then are you trying to get back to wherever you were before, right? In other words, if you came from grandparents' home, if you came from this other person's home, is the goal to try and go back, or at this time you're trying to transition into adulthood on your own, and how can we help you be successful with that transition?
It makes me think of just the short time that I've been with the program, this big success story of this young adult that he was not living at home. His mother didn't allow him to live at home because he was gay, and made him leave the home. And so he was able to stay with the advocates, right? And I don't know how he got involved with Wraparound, but I wasn't there when that first happened. But it was such a beautiful experience at the end, where he was able to take care of himself. He got a job. He got a place to live. He was 18 years old, and he had to become an adult. And
All at once.
Had to make a trip to California, right?
California, because I was kind of going to point to that challenge, right? That we know a lot of our youth that experience homelessness, they sometimes get kicked out of their home without their documents. So whoever's in the home might retain those. So birth certificate, all of that. But in the cases of some of our immigrant youth, they are from countries where we don't even have a consulate office in our state. Right. And that was the situation for this youth, right? We don't even have a consulate
in Colorado.
Colorado. And so we helped them to go to LA to his consulate office.
That was a challenge.
By getting him there by bus, a
hotel.
Yeah, getting a hotel and trying to figure out even like, how do you check into a hotel if you don't have identification?
And the embassy was closed, and all the systems shut down, and he couldn't get his documents, and had to come back home. And then we sent him a second time.
Yeah.
It was a challenge.
And eventually, I think mom actually had to be there to sign.
Yes.
And I think just like our program working with him, like we were able to get mom to agree to like go sign for him. And I've had other situations like that where, like the youth left without their documents, and like the parent didn't want to give them their documentation. And by working with us, they finally agreed. Like I had one situation where it's like literally like mom agreed to go to the DMV and meet us there and hand us over the birth certificate and social security card so this youth could get their driver's license or whatever it was that we were trying to get. And it was just work, right? And was to like get them to agree to do that. Like she finally said like, yep, I'll show up to the DMV, just give you the documents, and left.
And we've had the young lady that was pregnant, that she
was homeless, wasn't she? Yeah. So yeah, youth that run away, right? And I think we have been successful with some of those too, like with your reunify by starting to work with the youth first and giving them that like stabilization period, helping both the parent and the youth identify like who that youth can stay with, and just working on what is kind of triggering that escalation of like getting to that point. I think it's been helpful to also help systems understand to prioritize, because I would say like in some of those tables that we have been at, like the priority that people are thinking of is like, well, this youth is not attending school. But we have been very good about pointing out like, yes, like that's a huge priority, but if our youth is running away, that's probably a bigger priority to get them to not run away and be safe in their home. Right. And we then can partner with the education system to like not necessarily ignore the education piece, but be creative of like, how can this youth still potentially like do the minimum that they have to do right now so that it gives us all time to focus on this like other priority of like, if we can get them to sleep home instead of sleep somewhere else because they're running away, then we'll work on the school piece next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to get them stable and safe.
Just, yeah. What else can you think of? I would say just to, I guess the call to action is, I would say in order for us to have a lot of the success that we have in our program, it has required a lot of ensuring that policies can work for and not against. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of education for people to understand those kind of things and understand that like funding can be utilized this way, right? Like, why are we sending someone to LA?
Yes.
Right? Why are we purchasing a bus pass?
Right.
Right. Why are we purchasing a Visa card? Because people all the time might look at it as like, why are our grant funds being used to pay for a Visa card that you're like handing a youth?
Right.
The reality is, for this youth that had to travel to LA, we needed to send him with a visa, like prepaid visa, so he could purchase food along the way, and he could purchase his meals over there, because like that's the only way. And that's the kind of thing that I would say like often, right? Like grants are written such that like you can pay staff, you can pay administrative costs, right? Like the budgets are created like so strict, and there's no opportunity for building in that kind of like funding that like only the people that work in the program, only those of us that are directly seeing the challenges can actually see that we need some flexibility.
And it takes teamwork because there's a lot of components that have to come together, a lot of different people working on that one project to get it to work properly. So it does take a lot of people having to deal with a certain situation to be able to help a homeless person to find a place to stay and to get that person to LA. And so it's not just one person that is working on it.
And I would say too, like the misconception about like youth's abilities and skills and youth like trusting, like this is my favorite group of kids to work with. And what we have been able to see, right, like the way in which they engage into their own planning their goals, into thinking about their own vision is amazing. The way they are so resilient to take on so many different aspects of their life, like their education. We have kids that are like playing sports, going to college, doing so many things. I mean, there's this whole like misconception that these are troubled youth, and they are not.
Right.
They're young people experiencing homelessness are incredible youth. And like you were saying, right, it takes teamwork. We have seen that. It takes an adult, a trusting adult, walking those challenges with you and being able to provide that space of them being in the driver's seat with us right there, right, on the passenger seat with them. Right. But they're really like planning for their own life with our help. Then like when we started services, and now they're like doing good in school, graduating school, like parents wanted to show up. That's been graduation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Parents
Now
want to show their face. And now they want to be part of that
After the kids
success,
are-
right? And it's and again, that to me is like all that youth needed was, again, a trusting adult that could understand that like youth come with challenges and that that's not like unique to certain youth, right? It's just like, again, they need that space, they need resources.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a couple of those, like parents were not involved, and then graduation day came and they were all dressed up and showed up.
Look at my kid.
Look at, yeah, that's my child right there. Yeah.
And then
yeah.
they are so proud of themselves. They can stand up there proud and come from another country and difficult to get here. And then they have achieved so much. And
Yeah.
really, really could be stand there with their head held high.
And I think that priority piece, like we've worked with the principals to know that we'll say like, well, yes, he's not coming to school, she's not coming to school. They're going to continue to not come to school. But like, if we can focus on like de-escalating things at home, we can focus like on law enforcement having to respond to this home every whatever other day, every 3 days, right?
Yeah.
That's a win, right? That's a win. We will focus on school as things become more manageable, right?
Yeah.
And that's another thing, right? That I think like we always tell youth, right? Like, I'm not here to like, I want to understand, like, are you trying to graduate? Are you trying to like get to 17 and drop out when you can legally make that decision? And the answer to that is yes. Like, as soon as I'm 17, I want to drop out. Like, I'm going to support you with your next goal.
Right.
Right. I'm going to support you to get a job when you're 17. I'm not going to be pushing you to graduate if that's not something you want. Now, along the way, you might figure out that you do, and often they do. But with all honesty, like, and that's again, like, they can see us as like, we're not here to tell you that you have to go to school. We are here to tell you that you have to go to school until you're 17, right? And you'll be in compliance. But again, if you tell me like, hey, I am 17 and I don't want to go to school anymore, what I really want is a job, that's what I'm going to help you with. And so I think that youth are able to see that we're not like a system that's here to mandate something on them, except for those things that are already mandates. Right. We can help you be compliant.
That's right.
That's what we do. We can help you be compliant if you have whatever, something legal, something school, something else. But I'm not the one asking you to do those things.
Right. Yep. Love our kid.
Yeah.
Guide them and just support. Yeah. And just to be there for them or whatever.
Right. And I like with the example that you gave, right, that was the beginning. Like what we heard is like, oh yeah, like you really need your passport because this is the one's going to help you get a job, rent a place of your own, right?
Yes.
And so,
to get his driver's license.
Like we understand that, and like we are going to try to help you as much as we can to make that happen, right? And then I would say like that's a very like great example of, again, like this youth was in the driver's seat and you were in the passenger seat because like you were there every time he called and said like, oh my gosh, the system was shut down. Now I need to come back, but I'm gonna have to return. Yes. That we just like went back to the drawing board with him, right? And they're okay, like this is gonna require another bus pass.
It was a little bit challenging,
right? But
we made it,
right?
And
I think in the policy side, like the decisions that I'm making as the program manager is, again, like not having like a strict like this is across the board, like we pay for this and we don't pay for this. It's like, what is this youth experiencing, right? Well, this youth is actually going to require a bit more than another youth, right, when it comes to funding. And if we had like a strict like cap or something, we're not able to like make that flexibility, right, to say like, oh, this youth requires 2 bus passes.
versus like one bus pass, and it requires a out-of-state bus pass, versus our youth might not even need a bus pass of any kind. What they need is something else. So just very like individualizing the services.
Yeah.
Right. And when you write grants, that's the first thing. Like when I write grants, like that's what I look at. It's like when I see the Excel spreadsheet where it's like 3 categories and everything needs to go in those 3. Right.
Oh my.
Yeah,
What am I gonna do?
I describe this as, I don't know what those toys are called, but my staff always hears me saying this, right? Those like shapes that the children,
Oh,
they
the
have
little
this,
ball
yeah,
with
the
the different
little ball
shapes.
with the different like animals or shapes, and they're trying to fit them in. I always say like, this is our work. We're trying to fit those little shapes into like,
Right.
does it fit here? Does it fit here? Well, it comes from like us seeking those sources of funding and pulling them from different sources, right? And always like trying to explain to the funder, like, if you give us like some flexibility here, this is why. Yeah. Like we purchased a vehicle, right, a couple of years ago, and it was grant funded. And initially, like when we read through the application, shared the goals, the funder wasn't quite like understanding why we need a vehicle. And then they requested a call, and they were like, well, we are very interested in like funding your project, but we want to learn more about this.
Yeah.
And as soon as I explained that we're up in the mountains, that that our families that we serve and the youth that we serve, that we have to like go over pretty much every mountain pass in order to get them to a medical appointment, to a lot of these services, and that we needed a reliable vehicle that can, like, we can drive in the snow, we can drive across all the mountain passes, and we're helping youth go to their probation appointments, we're helping them to go to the food bank. And again, when some of these like services like medical and dental might be out of town, or sometimes like mental health evaluations, right? Have had to be with providers that are, it's some kind of like evaluation that was like mandated by probation or whatever. And it's not like, it can not be done in our local mental health center, and it's all the way in Denver.
Yeah.
When I explained all of that and said like, this is why we need a vehicle, they were like, please continue to share these stories, because like this is the type of project we want to fund. And we would not have been able to like clearly see it from the application. But once you described, and once we have a sense that like, yeah, you're not in Denver, right? Like you can't give somebody bus pass for that, right? Go get your mental health eval.
Yeah.
Right? Drive, just go 3 hours, go find like whatever, 5 buses that you're going to have to take.
Yeah.
Right? Again, once I explained that, they were like super happy. And oh my gosh, our vehicle is a lifesaver, right?
It is.
For
It's
us,
a
like
wonderful,
helping youth,
beautiful.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, you had to take a youth to get dental.
To Canyon City.
To Canyon City,
Yeah.
right? To get dental work.
Yeah. So it's been very handy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's so really
Yeah,
nice
and it was like
vehicle.
urgent, kind of, right?
Yes.
Like he had been without the dental care, had gone without it for a long time.
Right. So yeah, I'm very, very blessed that people are willing to help, willing to fund. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they see the need.
And we just asked that. We're like, don't give us just 3 boxes, please. Good things. Okay. Or let us choose those 3 boxes.
Yeah.
Based on the needs of our program, right? And what we see. Yeah.